Today we are going to have a discussion on modifiers, auto and extern. What is auto modifier? Auto means automatic. Simple. Variables declared inside a scope by default are automatic variables. If you remember in our previous lesson, I told you that what is an automatic variable. An automatic variable is a variable which automatically get destroyed after the completion of a function, or you can say scope, in which it is defined. For example, this is the main function. Inside this I declared and defined a variable var. This variable get automatically destroyed after the completion of this function. Now what is the benefit of an automatic variable? Automatic variable's major benefit is that this variable won't waste any memory. Because after the completion of this function, this variable get destroyed, means that the memory allocated to this variable gets deallocated and it can be used by some other variable or some other piece of code. Now writing auto in front of this integer variable is equivalent to not writing it. Therefore, writing auto in front of integer variable doesn't provide you any power at all. If you want to initialize auto variable, by default it will be initialized with some garbage value. Now this is something very interesting thing to know. Suppose I declared and defined an auto integer variable and try to print its value, which I have not assigned to it initially. Now what does it really print? It prints some random value, or you can say some garbage value, because I haven't initialized this variable, right? If I try to print this variable, then it will produce some garbage value which is quite unexpected. And this is obviously weird. On the other hand, global variable by default initialized to 0. If you declare and define a global variable which is outside of all functions, then this variable automatically get initialized with the value equals to 0 if you want initialized it before. Here you can see if I try to print this variable, this global variable, the value that is getting printed is 0. That is why you can say that global variable is by default initialized with value equals to 0. Now what is extern modifier? Suppose I write int var, this is some variable name and this is its data type. What do I mean by writing this thing? This means that this is a variable which is of integer data type, and I ask the compiler to define this variable, or you can say allocate the memory to this variable, right? That is what we mean by declaration and definition. Declaration simply means that you're declaring to compiler that this variable is of some type. It has its type as integer in this case. And when we say definition, we mean that we are asking the compiler, please allocate memory to this variable. On the other hand, if we write extern int var, it simply means declaration only and not definition. It says to compiler that this is a variable of some integer data type, but please don't allocate any memory to it. Now why do we do so? Extern is a short name for external, used when a particular file needs to access a variable from another file. Now imagine we are going to create a project. In that project there are multiple files. Now if suppose in one file I have written extern int var, okay? What do I mean by that is that I'm trying to access a variable which is somewhere in my project, maybe in some other file, and I'm simply asking the compiler that please reuse that variable in this file as well. That is what it means by extern integer var. Here I'm trying to access the variable which is there somewhere in the other file. By writing extern in front of it would not define it once again and simply declare it, and we are going to reuse that variable which was defined somewhere in the other file. That is what this line means. We are trying to access the variable which is there in some other file, in a particular file that we are right now working on. This is what we called as extern int var, because we are not required to create this variable once again. This variable is somewhere defined already. I just want to reuse this once again. Therefore, there is a need of declaration only and not definition. This will save the memory and provides reusability. That is why we are using extern modifier. Let's try to create a code in which I'm going to show you that how to create a project in which you would be able to declare multiple files and then finally combine them together and use this extern int var successfully. I have created this project my program 1. If you want to create your project, go to file, click on new, click on project. Then click on console application, simply click on go. Then next, choose C as your language, click next, choose some project title. My title of this program is My Program 1. You can choose any title of your choice. Then click on next and then simply click on finish, and this will create your project. Here I had already created a project, therefore there is no need to create another project in my case. Here if you click this button over here, plus button over here, this will open up the sources folder, and you can see there are two files that I had created inside this project, right? One is main.c and the other one is other.c. Now here inside this main.c, you can see I have written this code where I have declared an integer variable, and that too with the modifier extern. Then I write a main function. Inside that main function, I simply want to print this value. The purpose of writing this code is to access this variable called a that is available within this file other.c. Here you can see this is my other.c file. If you want to create your file, click on empty file and choose the location. It will ask you, do you want to add this new file in the active project? Then you click on yes and save the file with .c extension, and then you will be able to create another file within this particular project, you can say. In my case, I click on no and simply cancel it. And here I have written just a one line, that is integer a is equals to 5, right? I declared and defined a variable a and assigned it a value 5. Purpose of writing is to actually allow this main.c file to access this particular variable with the help of this extern int a. Let's execute the code and see what happens. This output shows this thing that we are successful in getting this variable which is there inside this other.c file. Now suppose I comment this out, and as we know, by commenting this out, this is not visible to the compiler. I save it, try to debug this code. You will find this out that you got an error, that is undefined reference to a. Because when extern int a is going to refer this particular variable, or you can say the other file, it won't be able to find that particular variable defined over there. This error is thrown by linker and not the compiler. Compiler think of this code and it compiles successfully, but linker is a program that does this thing, combining the files together and linking those things and those references. Like in this case, you have declared an extern int a. Purpose of linker is to actually link this particular variable to its actual definition somewhere in the file. And as you can see, it won't be able to find that particular variable, therefore it returns undefined reference to a. Right? Let's remove the content and then everything works fine. It will print the output is equals to 5, right? Okay. Now suppose I declare this variable multiple number of times. Is it allowed or not allowed? Let's see. As you can see, it will produce the output as it is, therefore it is allowed. Because here, I've declared this variable and I'm not defining it, right? By using an extern keyword in front of an integer variable, you are declaring it and not defining it. It is totally allowed. Multiple declarations are allowed, but multiple definitions are not allowed. If you write integer a multiple times within the scope or block, or you can say a function, then it is not allowed. Multiple declarations are allowed and multiple definitions are not allowed. Suppose I comment this section once again in this other.c file and save it. And here, suppose I declare a global variable and inside this main function, I write extern int a. Now this is local to this main function, you can say. And what it does is, let's see, it prints 9. Extern variable simply says to compiler, go outside from my scope and you will find the definition of the variable that I declared. Remember one thing, this is integer a variable, right? And if I go out of the scope, it will first check its file in which this variable is declared. If the definition of that variable is found, then it will get printed. As you can see in this case, integer a is equals to 9. Therefore, the value 9 is getting printed. Otherwise, if it is not found over here, then it will search the other files and see for the definition of this variable a. That is what is happening when we try to print this value. First, it goes out of the scope. If it is local to some function, it will go out of that scope and search its own file. If it finds the definition, then it will print that. Otherwise, it goes to other file. That is what is happening. Now here I change the code a little bit and change this to again extern variable. When an extern variable is initialized, then memory for this variable is allocated, and this is the catch. Usually when we write extern int a, memory is not allocated, it is just a declaration. But when an extern variable is initialized, then memory for this variable is allocated and it will be considered defined. In this case, I assigned the value, therefore it is considered as a defined variable, and if I execute this will produce the answer 9. It won't have to go anywhere outside this program. It will simply print its own initialized value, that is 9. Here are the takeaways for the extern modifier. When we write extern, some data type, some variable name, no memory is allocated. Only property of variable is announced. As we know this thing already, right? Multiple declarations of extern variable is allowed within the file. This is not the case with automatic variables. As I already told you, if an automatic variable is defined once, cannot be defined once again. But as we know this thing, when we write extern in front of an integer variable, it is just a declaration. And multiple declarations are totally allowed. Therefore, we can declare it multiple number of times within the same block. Extern variable says to compiler, go outside from my scope and you will find the definition of the variable that I declared. Compiler believes that whatever the extern variable said is true and produce no error. Linker throws an error when he finds no such variable exists. As I already told you that linker is responsible for linking the modules, or you can say linking different files which are available within the project. Linker is responsible to link those files and link extern variable to its actual definition. When an extern variable is initialized, then memory for this variable is allocated and it will be considered defined. Okay friends, this is it for now. See you in the next lecture.